What's up, guys? In this lesson, we will start learning about one of the most important files of a WordPress theme. The file is called functions.php. The main idea of this lesson is to teach you how to load any style sheet into your theme, and in the right way, which is more important. This lesson is a bit lengthy, but once you understand the process described here, you'll be able to easily replicate it as many times as you need. Everything I say here is extremely important, so hang in there. In the last lesson, we just started this layout creation work, breaking our index into 3 parts. We created the header, our footer, and filled our dynamic area with the functions that call the footer and the header. So let's go to today's work. Typically, to call a style sheet in pure HTML, we'll just create a CSS folder and organize our files inside it. And then we call this file right there in the head tag. For the WordPress theme, the picture is just a little different. We never include style sheets directly. There is a lot of explanations for that, but I'm not going to stop now to explain why, since that will make us lose our chain of thoughts. Well, in order to write our CSS, we're gonna use that style sheet file that we created in the beginning of the course. We also have the possibility to create a separate file. That's how I used to do in the past, but lately I've been preferring to use only the base CSS file to write all my CSS. Okay, but if I'm not going to call the CSS file directly here inside the head tag, how will WordPress know that this file exists? Is it some kind of magic? Well, not necessarily. The most appropriate way to do this is to create a file called functions.php within our theme. If you look at other themes like the 2019, for example, it has a functions.php file too. If you open this file up, you'll see that it has several functions. The functions.php file acts as a kind of plugin. But unlike plugins which apply to the site as a whole, ideas, it affects all the themes at once, functions.php only applies to the theme that is currently active. So anything I write inside this functions.php when 2019 is active will only apply to the 2019 theme. In the same way, the functions.php we are going to create will only apply to the theme in this fancy lab folder. And what does function.php have? What is its function? Well, it can include the call of our styles, our scripts, the sidebars we're going to create, our menu functions, thumbnail image settings, and we can also create our specific functions and load them into WordPress. We're going to use this file a lot during the WooCommerce configuration, as you see. So let's create our own file to load our style sheet. But before we talk about the function that makes this magic happen, I will try to explain more or less what is the dynamics of what's going to happen in this class. Well, the loading process of a WordPress site is a bit different from most sites. This loading process is followed by several moments of execution. WordPress has a word for those moments. They are called hooks. Some of these hooks are defined inside the WP settings file. If you open this file and search for the term do_action, you'll find several of these hooks. For example, setup theme is a hook fired before the theme is loaded. There are others like after setup theme, init, WP loaded. Anyway, each one is used for one thing. The hook that interests us in this lesson is WP enqueue scripts. And this hook is inside the script loader.php file. We find this file being included here. And then opening it. we have the WP Enqueuing scripts hook. And this guy here will be in charge of loading our style sheets into WordPress. How does it work in practice? Let's write a function and have WordPress fire this function on this hook. Once the function is triggered, our style sheets are associated with the theme. It's like this function hangs on this hook, so to speak. This is what WordPress calls enqueuing. So we always enqueue the style sheets and scripts inside WordPress. That is, we put them in a queue, in an order. And it seems like a complicated thing, but it's not. Let's understand this better in practice now. Let's create a new file in Sublime Text with the name functions.php. This file has to be created inside the folder Fancy Lab, right? And before a doubt arises, yes, this file has to be called functions.php. Don't forget the S at the end of the name, right? Let's start the file with the opening PHP tag. But notice that we'll just open the tag, but we won't close it. In all files that contain only pure PHP, you don't need to close the tag. This prevents you from having errors such as headers already sent coming up on the front end. Let's copy the header information from a template I have already prepared here. Very simple indeed. Now inside the file, let's create a PHP function. And a PHP function, as you know, starts with the word function, followed by the name of the function. The name of our function will be fancy underscore lab underscore scripts. I would like to point something out to you. It is very important that you put the name of the theme as a prefix in almost all the code. Are you going to create a function? Pass the name of the theme as a prefix. Are you going to create a menu? Include the theme name together. Are you going to create a special image size? Also put the name of the theme first. You'll see a lot of that during the course. That prevents any features of your theme from getting confused with another theme or with some of WordPress, especially function names, alright? Okay, now the WordPress function that will make our style sheets enqueued, loaded, so to speak, is the WP enqueue style. The word enqueue means put in a queue, right? When this function is read, it will load our CSS files one underneath the other in a queue, and you'll be able to see that later in the source code of the page. For this function to do something, you'll have to pass some parameters to it. The first one is the handle. What will be the handle, the identifier of the file in the queue? Let's give it the fancy lab style handle. But it can be any name. As long as you don't repeat these names, don't add spaces or special characters, that's fine. And the second parameter is what invokes the path to our file. There are several ways to get the path to a file that is located inside the folder of your theme. The best known and the most used is getTemplateDirectoryURI. This function returns the URI to the theme folder, something like you're seeing right here on the screen. There's also one function called getTemplateDirectory, which returns only the absolute path of the folder and is very useful in some occasions. And there's another one called getStylesheetURI, which returns the absolute path to the theme's main stylesheet file, a file called style.css. In this case, that's what we need. If you choose to write your CSS to a separate file, let's suppose you had created a folder called CSS and had a file called template.css inside. To call this file, you'll have to use the other function getTemplateDirectoryURI. It will then identify for you the URL to the Fancy Lab folder. We'll do this later in the course and you understand better in practice. But in our case, we don't need to do all this if it's just to find the main file, okay? Let's just use getStylesheetURI. The third parameter tells if our style sheet has any dependency on another file. That is, if there is another style sheet that needs to be loaded before our style.css. That is, if it's dependent on some other file. If it exists, we need to inform the handle of this file inside an array. For example, if there was a style sheet called full.css, we would pass its name inside the array, like this, full. Since we don't have any dependency, we can leave only the array empty. Another parameter that the function needs is the version. This parameter is not required. We can type, for example, 1.0, which would be the version of our style sheet. And so the version text will be concatenated with the file name. And then afterwards, we can see the version number in the source code. The last parameter has to do with what kind of media this CSS file refers to. It can be print, screen, or all. All will be related to all types of media, and it's the value that is generally used. Fine, but it's not enough to declare the function. No function is automatically executed within WordPress. First, we have to add this function to an action, assigning it to a hook. So we are going to associate our load scripts function to a hook called wp_enqueue_scripts, the one we talked about earlier in this lesson. To attach the hook to the function, we are going to use another WordPress function called add_action. You see this function used many times in WordPress. We're going to use it a lot when we're working with WooCommerce. First, we'll specify the name of the action hook, which in our case will be wp_enqueue_scripts. And then the function that will be executed, which is this one we just created. So, what's going on here? We have created our fancy lab scripts function. Inside it, we have called the function that prints the address of our style sheet, style.css. It doesn't have any dependencies. Its version is 1.0 and is relative to all types of media. The add action function adds an action within the WordPress execution. Then the WordPress page will load, and as soon as it loads, we have several hooks available. One of those hooks is called wp_enqueue_scripts. We take advantage of this hook and make a function run on it called fancy lab scripts, which in turn calls our style sheet. Well, that's quite a gear, isn't it? Well, this lesson is getting pretty lengthy. That's why I'm going to divide this explanation into two parts. So in the next lesson, we'll see if all this is working. And more, let's learn a few tricks to eliminate caching problems related to CSS files. So, until then.